So I've decided to put together an end-of-year recap of the graphics card market, the current states of both inventory levels and prices, and boy, are those both jacked up right now, so that you'll have a better idea of what's worth building and what's even possible to build going into 2021. Stay with me. If you're looking for a sleek and efficient AIO for your next PC, check out Be Quiet's Pure Loop AIO lineup. Choose between 4 popular sizes that all sport Pure Wings 2 fans and enjoy qualities like dedicated fill ports and decoupled pumps for minimal vibration and maximum aesthetic at the block. Learn more about Be Quiet Pure Loop AIOs below. So let's start off with cheaper graphics cards and work our way up. Firstly, we have the 1080p contenders, things like the RX 5500 XT, the GTX 1650, a few other cards like the GTX 1050 Ti, 1060, RX 570s, and RX 580s. Anything weaker or cheaper than these, and the margins really start to shrink, so we'll focus on the ones we expect to be the most affected here. And these are widely popular as well, starting first with the 5500 XT. So these MSRP'd at launch in the mid to high $100 range, with the 8GB variants asking for around $200. Newegg appears to have one option for around $230, but elsewhere these are out of stock. Amazon is in a similar boat. You may find 1 or 2 SKUs popping up occasionally for around MSRP, but most are on back order well into 2021 or insanely marked up by third parties. And many of these are selling used on eBay for around the same price, so I'd say stay away from these if possible. And you find that the trend, at least as of time of filming, is that the AMD cards, especially in the used market, are more expensive than they really should be. Granted, that's not to say that Nvidia cards aren't, but you'll find that AMD cards are a little more inflated in the used market than Nvidia cards. Some of that has to do with mining, some of that has to do with inventory across the board, but we'll talk more about that later. But moving on to the GTX 1650, in a way, kind of in a similar boat, so I won't bother really wasting too much time here. Most of that are in stock on Newegg and Amazon, are being sold by third-party entities, marked up by 50% or more. You shouldn't be spending more than $200 US for any one of these, regardless of the cooler type or brand. I mean, it's a 1650 for crying out loud. There are, however, a few great listings that have recently sold under MSRP on eBay. So if you're comfortable looking on eBay with the buyer protection guarantee, this is a GPU to consider. For example, this Ventus 1650 is a great SKU for this sale price. Now, the 1060 on the used market can be a great value in the right setting. These are better performers across the board than 1650s and are frequently sold on eBay for around $150 or so, typically less than 1650s, which is kind of ironic. Consider one of these 6GB variants for reliable 1080p gaming. You don't need one with an overkill air cooler attached. You don't need a $300 Strix version, and you should probably stay away from the 3GB version unless you're confident the games you play won't fully saturate that limited frame buffer. Now, both the RX 570 and 580 are still great buys going into 2021 at around 80 to 100 US. I wish they'd be a bit lower, but this is just the current state of things. Potentially even better deals they could be on the used market than the 1060. You'll squeak out around 80% of the 1060's performance in most games, and for considerably less than retail. Look for 4GB models for $80 or below, and 8GB models for no more than around 100, or depending on how badly you need a certain SKU or a certain cooler, maybe $120. By the way, while we're on this card, I see people buying these new on eBay all day for like over $200, and it doesn't make sense to me. I think that they're afraid that some of these cards were used for mining, and that's why they're staying away from used 570s and 580s altogether, but we have a video putting this rumor to bed specifically. Now let's get into the mid-tier space, starting with AMD offerings Vega 56 and 64, the RX 5600 XT, 5700 and 5700 XT. Jesus, AMD with the naming scheme. Not that Nvidia is much better, but it just drives me nuts. Now, pretty much all of these were decent deals, at least decent deals, at MSRP, but we all know how that's going by this point. Ampere and RDNA 2 have pretty much null and voided previous gen hardware at MSRP, but retailers are still trying to recover some profit, and they're using the excuse of Ampere and RDNA 2 not being in stock to justify the sticking with MSRP asking price. And some of them are taking it a bit further than that. For example, literally dozens of RX 5700 XTs are listed on Newegg from third parties for well over what they're worth at this point, some listing over MSRP, and you should not entertain them. The same goes for Vega 56 and 64. Now, these are a few generations old by this point, and they are not worth anywhere near what some of these third-party retailers are asking. Even on eBay, actually, latest sales and bids are up to around $300 used for a Vega 56 card. These are in green, which means that they sold for these prices. No, I disagree with it totally, seeing as though they're comparable in performance to GTX 1070s, which are going for around $100 less. We'll talk about those soon. Vega 64s, by the way, in a similar boat, they're consistently selling for around $400, but these are worth no more than $300 given current performance offerings from Team Red. So look, Nvidia cards have proliferated, AMD not as much. You'll find that a lot of people, according to at least Steam surveys, are using GTX 1060s, GTX 1650s. Not as many are using AMD cards for reliable gaming in 2020. It's just how it is, not saying that AMD cards aren't viable alternatives. Many of them are, but Nvidia just, they control that section of the market a bit more at this point. And so because there are fewer of these AMD cards in circulation, that kind of affects prices. The exception is the 570, 580, 480, 580 game. There are tons of those cards out there, but many of them were used for mining. They were bought in bulk for mining, and you would think there'd be a ton of them out there for sale now that people are no longer mining, but people are actually still mining. Yeah, that's still a thing. And the fact that we can't actually find too much modern tech from Team Red in supply right now isn't helping anything. But that doesn't mean that you should fall victim to inflated prices in the used market, period. So I'd stay away from Vega altogether at this point. That may change, I'm sure it will change at some point, but right now, end of 2020 going to 2021, stay away from them. In fact, I would say this extends largely into the RDNA market as well. So the 5700 XTs are consistently selling for above MSRP in the used market, which shouldn't be happening in a balanced economy. Again, I don't know why these are selling. It's a testament to the craziness of 2020, but I found very similar trends with the 5700 and the 5600 XT, sorry, on eBay. Just doesn't make any sense. Again, these are marked in green, which means they have sold for these prices. Now next we've got mid-tier Nvidia cards. It's a bit better here, though prices are still, again, a bit stubborn. See, Ampere should have taken a dump on current Pascal and Turing used offerings. I expected that to happen, especially on sites like eBay, but of course, Ampere's limited supply has resulted in stagnant prices elsewhere. Why should sellers feel compelled to lower their prices when the alternative isn't really obtainable? I mean, if there's no supply, there's no competition, why should you feel the need to lower your prices anymore? So that is in defense of those selling these cards for these prices. Like, I have no qualms with anyone trying to maximize their return on their investment. I get that. Where I have a real problem is when people start pretending that their products aren't actually what they are. If they say that the 1070 that they have listed on OfferUp is capable of 4K 240 FPS in all AAA titles, like, that's a blatant lie. Most of us who know a thing or two about tech know that 1070s are not capable of that. That's where I have a problem, right? If you're gonna list the card for $600 and then say that in your listing, that's a problem for me. But if you're just gonna list it for $600 and then just say, yeah, it's a 1070, I used it for a few months, in great shape, still works. I mean, yeah, I could say, yeah, you've priced that way too high, but at the end of the day, if someone's willing to pay $600 for it, who's the bigger fool here? But anyway, off of that tangent, consider the 980 Ti. All right, this goes back as far as Maxwell, but it's still a great card. Multiple generations old again by this point, but still selling for $200 US. And that's actually less than what the GTX 1070s are selling for. And those are two very similar cards, I'll say. The 1070 I would obviously prefer. It's definitely a bit more efficient, a lot more efficient actually in terms of power draw. But if 1070s are going for mid 200s to almost $300 or even more than $300, the 980 Ti is looking a bit more appealing. That said, if you can find a 1070 for around $200 or a little less than $200, just stay away from blower cards. I think you're sitting pretty good. Now, the other interesting one in this category is the GTX 1080. So this one appears to be a bit better of a deal, seeing as though they're holding their value around $300 used. Again, should be a bit lower on account of Ampere. No one's denying that. But again, the demand is there for around or just under $300. Some are selling for more than that. Some are paying crazy amounts for like Kingpin cards. I don't know why, but it's one of those things. People are going to see value and you're never really going to be able to justify it because you aren't that person. I think these are all day between $250 and $300. Any more than $300 and you're slightly getting ripped off. Now, for the RTX 2060s, similar performing Turing cards to the 1080 from the previous generation, but they're selling for quite a bit more. So I'd say stay away from these altogether, at least for the moment. End of discussion. Now, venturing into RTX 2070 territory, that pushes us quite literally into RTX 3070 price territory. And 3070s, as I'm sure many of you are aware by this point, are significantly better performers and just better cards across the board for the same price. And those cards are brand new, whereas a lot of these we're looking at here are used 2070s. And I mean, you're not gonna be stupid, right? If you have the choice between a brand new card and a used card, and the new card is better and it's still priced the same, who the heck would choose this thing? Apparently plenty of people are still buying 2070s for this price. So either they're really desperate or they just don't know what these cards are capable of. They see the 70 in the name and they think, oh, you know, 2070, 3070, not a huge difference there. Yeah, they're not worth this. They're not worth anywhere close to this, but some people seem to think so. So if you ask me, anyone paying MSRP for a 2070 going into 2021 is crazy, I'll just say it. This also applies to super variants, mind you, which are pretty much the same cards, just, you know, slightly better cards, I should say, but similar prices. It doesn't change my mind at all about the SKUs in general. And it's a similar story for the 1080 Ti, which, I mean, this card right now is driving me nuts. It's a great card. 1080 Ti is a phenomenal card, right? Used to be the best card out there, practically, but it's aged quite a bit on account of Ampere, and these prices are it's just not gonna cut it. I mean, anything over $350 at this point is not a good deal in my book, and anything over $400 is a horrendous deal. And when seen in the context of what you could have gotten for a similar price had you just been patient. A 3070 is going to walk all over a 1080 Ti for a similar price to what some of these 1080 Ti's are selling for on eBay. It's freaking nuts. I feel like this is kind of like the whole Core i7 used market thing, where like people just see Core i7 and they think that it's automatically worth at least $200, even though it's like 4 or 5 generations old and you can get a brand new Core i7 for like $300. You know, if it's just the name, it just carries around. So if it's a Ti card, well, it's gotta be really freaking good, you know? But if it's an 80 SKU Ti card, I should say, there's also the 1070 Ti, which is kind of a weird launch name. Then you have the 1660 Ti. What is Nvidia? Okay, we already took a dump on AMD's naming nomenclature, whatever. Nvidia, they've got their own set of problems. But anyway, I've said this multiple times, I'll say it again. Do not let your patience get the best of your wallet. Don't let it sucker you into an awful deal. And I'm frankly shocked at how many of these 1080 Ti's are selling for 500 frickin' US dollars. That is literally RTX 3070 MSRP. Come on, folks. Now, the goal of this video obviously isn't to shame those who may have overpaid. At this point, it's kind of, you know, it's what it is. But I really want to establish like a specific price range for each card. And I know I didn't cover every card here, but you know, most of the cards that are pretty popular nowadays. I also want to educate future shoppers. I'm trying to save you money. That's my goal at the end of the day. It's how this channel started. And yes, there's a bit of value to be had in the GPU market. You just gotta know where to look. Yeah, at this point, you just looking on the surface, you might think, wow, everything's pretty trashy right now. Everything's really expensive, or you just can't outright buy it. Yeah, that is the case for the most part. But if you're willing to bid, especially on a site like eBay, again, you're gonna have that buyer protection guarantee, which eBay's guarantee favors the buyer way more than it favors the seller. Trust me, I've been on both sides of this equation. I'd much rather be the buyer of a product on eBay than the seller of one. It's just, not only do you get bagged by the eBay fees, but you also have to deal with the potential incompetent buyer or just, you know, shipping issues. It's a cluster. So you just gotta know where to look. You gotta know when to look. You gotta be patient with your bids. Again, don't buy something that you don't absolutely need, especially if it's way over MSRP. And I'm sure there were a few cards in this breakdown, again, that I think I missed. I'm sure I missed a few of them. I know I missed a few, but don't be afraid to ask about them in the comment section below. I'm here to help, as are many others, and we can probably point your wallets in the right direction. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate that. Consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for learning with me.